Hey you, welcome to my channel, A Year and a Day. My name is Jenny and today I'd like to share some seasonal vibes with you. As you might have heard in my last video, I spent most of September in Norway and Sweden. And it was absolutely wonderful experiencing early autumn in the Nordic woods. Now usually in September I am either at home in the Netherlands or traveling somewhere south to extend the summer, which is nice, but it also means that for years now autumn seems to kind of pass me by. Like one moment it's late summer and the next moment it's Halloween. And I frantically grab some Halloween decks to read with to try and get into the autumnal spooky season mood. But before I know it, Halloween is over and suddenly it already feels like winter and Christmas is approaching. It's like I'm constantly one step behind. So spending September up north and being outside in nature every single day really immersed me in autumn. During the weeks we were there, the colors on the trees slowly changed from green to orange, yellow and red. And there were mushrooms everywhere. I have never seen so many and such a variety of mushrooms before in my life. And it was nothing short of magical. So this year I am finally able to fully and timely submerge myself in autumnal energy, and I'm loving every moment of it. And in this video I would like to go through the different chapters of seasonal vibes I plan to go through from now till December, and show some random decks and books that fit those vibes perfectly. So let's dive in. And the first stage of my seasonal vibes is of course all about mushrooms. Mushrooms are the perfect representation of early autumn. When the temperatures drop and the woods smell like earth and rain, mushrooms start to show themselves. And instinctively we know summer is coming to an end. Now I'd love to be able to identify all the different mushrooms I saw in the Nordic woods. But even despite these beautiful vintage books on mushrooms, or as we say in Dutch, paddenstoelen, literally translating to toadstools, identifying mushrooms is not a skill I possess. So even though I didn't forage any mushrooms myself, we did receive a handful of cantarelles from our Swedish landlord, and they were delicious. Now when in thrift stores, I always keep an eye out for vintage books with beautiful illustrations. There is just something about the illustration style and the coloration that makes these books so precious. These two field guides about mushrooms are for sure two of my most favorite books in my collection. I love flipping through these any time of the year, but especially in the month of September, they are perfect for getting into that early autumn mood. Now let's move on to decks, and let's start with the deck of mushrooms. An illustrated introduction to fascinating fungi. Now I actually initially ordered this deck for my friend Sandy of Exploring Tarot here on YouTube. and I loved it so much that I couldn't resist ordering a copy for myself. This is not an oracle deck, but a deck full of beautifully illustrated mushrooms, with the backs of the cards containing additional information about all the different kinds. I really love the clean design of the cards and the beautiful illustrations. And it's a fun way learning more about all the different types of mushrooms. Now, the cardstock is a bit papery, so it probably will not hold up too well with a lot of shuffling. But of course, that is also not really the initial purpose of this deck. Although I love the idea of adding my own keywords to this deck, so it could be used as an oracle. But until I figured out which keywords to add, I will enjoy displaying these beautiful cards in early autumn and learning a little bit more about all the types of mushrooms out there. And that's the deck of mushrooms. The deck that of course needs to be added to the chapter of mushrooms is the Mushroom Hunter's Tarot by Joe Buckley. I completely missed the Kickstarter of this deck, and when trying to find a fun mushroom deck to add to my collection, I stumbled upon this one. And to be completely honest with you, I kind of expected this to be a gimmicky deck in my collection. Now, I love that this deck is a fun play on the Rider-Waite-Smith, and the lettering and colors match my centennial edition of the RWS perfectly. But other than looking pretty and fun, I didn't really expect myself to read with this deck an awful lot. But this deck completely took me by surprise. The illustration style and use of soft colors really give the whole deck a gentle, grounded vibe. And I really love the quality. The hardcover box, the booklets, and the beautiful matte cardstock really make this a well-produced indie deck. And to top it all off, I really enjoyed the guidebook. It might be small, but it holds a lot of information about each card, the mushrooms, and why that particular mushroom was chosen. I decided pretty last minute that this would be one of the decks that I would be taking with me to Norway and Sweden in September. And I am so incredibly happy that I did. It matched the autumnal vibes perfectly. And that's the Mushroom Hunter's Tarot. From the beauty and groundedness of mushrooms to connecting to our earth. Let's move on to two decks that make that connection to earth perfectly for me. Starting with the Druidcraft Tarot. The Druidcraft Tarot does an amazing job translating the classical Rider-Waite-Smith to another day and age in our history. All of the scenes are so recognizable and easy to read, but are clearly set in an age long gone, back when humanity lived in closer harmony to its surroundings. The pagan vibes and earthy color scheme in combination with an amazing guidebook easily make this one of my favorite decks. And I would definitely use it a lot more if I didn't completely hate the cardstock. I trimmed this deck because I thought the original huge borders were hideous, and I absolutely love the borderless look of the cards. But I did a dodgy trim job and the cards are way too glossy for my taste. And I can only hope that one day this deck will be released again with better updated cardstock. Because just look at it, it's beautiful. Autumn is not just a time for pretty mushrooms or spooky things. Autumn is also a time of letting go and saying goodbye to the abundance of summer. It's about the trees shedding their leaves and preparing for the harshness of winter. And the illustrations of Will Worthington always do a great job at transforming me back to a time where we were more connected to those cycles in nature. And for that reason, this is one of the decks that help me make a stronger connection to Earth in autumn. And that's the Druidcraft Tarot. The other deck that helps me connect to Earth in autumn is the Wildwood Tarot. And it's probably not a coincidence. This one too is illustrated by Will Worthington. The Wildwood Tarot is a deck that deviates from the Rider-Waite-Smith system and kind of does its own thing. The guidebook is very focused on humanity's relationship to nature. And spoiler alert, humanity is not really the hero of that story. So once again we see depictions of a time where humans lived in closer harmony to nature. And because of that, I find it to be a perfect deck helping me to get grounded in autumn. I've had some pretty profound and beautiful readings with the Wildwood Tarot relating to big life events. But this September I decided to bring this deck along with me to Norway and Sweden and use it for more day-to-day style readings. And I absolutely loved it. Using the deck for more casual readings really made it so much more approachable for me, and it helped me to connect with it even more. I don't think the Wildwood Tarot is everyone's cup of tea, but for me it holds a deep connection to nature and connecting to our earth in a way that we as humans have long forgotten. So I'm really happy I took this deck with me to Norway and Sweden and got to work with it a lot in September. And that's the Wildwood Tarot. So after using September as a transitional period between seasons, connecting to the earth and getting grounded, October makes me crave for cups of tea, books, stories and witches. And the first deck to help me bring those vibes into my daily life is the Seasons of the Witch Mabon Oracle. I also own the Samhain and Yule editions of this Oracle series, but this is by far my favorite. The Mabon edition was illustrated by another illustrator than the previous editions. And this illustration style feels a bit more folkloric and gentle to me, which I really appreciate. It captures the autumnal Mabon vibes perfectly, and I really loved working with this deck during September and October. and that's the Seasons of the Witch Maven Oracle. And what better tarot deck to match those witchy vibes than the Tarot of the Witch's Garden. This deck was recently published by Llewellyn, and I'm pretty pleased with the new linen cardstock, which I see as a real improvement. The Tarot of the Witch's Garden was illustrated by the same illustrator as a compendium of Witches Oracle deck. And I really love the amount of care that obviously went into the illustration of every single card. I also really love the comprehensive guidebook. It's in full color, holds full page illustrations of the cards and a lot of information about the meanings and interpretation. For me, these witchy decks are the perfect way to connect the groundedness of September to the world of fantasy and fiction I associate with the month of October. And that's the Tarot of the Witch's Garden. Now, just for fun, I would like to include some of my favorite books in this video. Starting with The Wolf's Secret. This book is illustrated by Veaceslav, who is one of my favorite illustrators. And The Wolf's Secret is a beautifully illustrated book full of autumnal vibes. Check out these lovely little mushrooms and the beautiful earthy color scheme. Now, I don't want to show the whole book and the whole story here in this video, but I hope you can see why this is one of those books that is great to bring out in October, both to read and for display. And that's The Wolf's Secret. Another beautifully illustrated book to bring out in October is Through the Woods. Through the Woods holds a number of short stories by Emily Carroll, and the stories are being told in comic book form. This book is a great transition into the end of October when Halloween is around the corner and you're in the mood for spooky stories. This is a lovely book that you can easily read in one sitting, and I really love rereading it around this time of year. And that's Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. And then it's the end of October and Halloween is around the corner, and it's finally time for spooky season to truly start. Now, instead of showing all of the decks within my collection that could be considered more dark or scary, I really only want to show a few decks that still hold that connection to the earthy and witchy decks and books I already showed. Starting with the Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle. The production quality for all of the Seasons of the Witch decks is lovely, with every edition having its own color scheme and different color gilding. As you might be able to tell, this edition was illustrated by a different illustrator than the Maven edition. But I think for the vibe of Samhain, this illustration style is a perfect match. It really captures the feeling of moving into the darkness of winter, where the beautiful colors of autumn are long gone and the nights are dark and cold. And that's the Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle. The next one is a tarot deck illustrated by one of my favorite illustrators. And it's the Darkwood Tarot, illustrated by Abigail Larson. This deck comes with a comprehensive guidebook written by Sasha Graham, who also wrote the guidebook for the Tarot of the Witch's Garden. The guidebook is written in story format, following a main character throughout the major arcana. Now, I've been meaning to do a proper deep dive of this deck for a couple of years now, to fully comprehend the story and interpretations behind each illustration. But to be honest, I have no trouble enjoying this deck without that. I really love the art style of Abigail Larson, and if anything, her artwork deserves bigger cards and better cardstock, but that's just my personal opinion. In any case, this is a lovely deck to use during spooky season. And that's the Darkwood Tarot. And what better way to go full spooky with the Horror Tarot. This one is also illustrated by Abigail Larson, and I only recently added it to my collection. I cannot get enough of Abigail Larson's art style, and I actually own 3 decks of hers, which are all featured in this video. And I would really love for her to illustrate an oracle deck one day, to pair with these tarot decks. But let's get back to the Horror Tarot. This is a publication by Insight Editions, and although I prefer this cardstock to the one by Llewellyn, I would still prefer for the artwork not to be enclosed by these huge borders. They are just a little too extra for me, and it was actually the reason why this deck remained on my wishlist for quite a while. But in the end, it's a fun deck to add to my collection, and I look forward to working with this one around Halloween. And that's the Horror Tarot. And because the color red seemed to be a little bit of a theme within these tarot decks, I decided to include this lovely little edition of Tales and Poems by Edgar Allan Poe. I picked up this one randomly years ago. But I guess if any little book would match those spooky Halloween vibes, it would be this one. And that's Tales and Poems by Edgar Allan Poe. And after spooky season, it is time for warm socks, hot drinks, and coziness, while we slowly transition into winter and Yule. And let's start with a deck that has some serious wintry vibes for me. And it's the West of the Moon Oracle deck. This lovely little indie oracle deck was inspired by a Nordic fairy tale called East of the Sun and West of the Moon. As you can see, the cards hold no keywords, only symbols that you can look up in the guidebook to find the meanings of the cards. Also, some of the cards are in landscape and some in portrait mode. And that, combined with the lack of keywords, might make this deck not everyone's cup of tea. But I absolutely loved the whimsical illustrations and the fact that every card seems to come straight out of a storybook. although I would have loved if the little white booklet had referred a little bit more to the story the deck is based on, I do appreciate the lovely little messages it holds. And that's the West of the Moon Oracle deck. The perfect deck to transition between spooky season and Yule is of course the Nightmare Before Christmas Tarot, illustrated by Abigail Larson. This is another Inside Editions publication, and as usual that means the minors are mostly bips. Now usually I don't really enjoy working with bip decks, but in this case it is not a showstopper for me. As I've said before, I absolutely love the illustration style of Abigail Larson, and she captures the whole spirit of the Nightmare Before Christmas so very well in this deck. And I've used this one for a couple of years now to get into the Christmas spirit. And that's the Nightmare Before Christmas Tarot. Where the Nightmare Before Christmas Tarot goes full Christmas, the Seasons of the Witch Yule Oracle has a much more pagan approach to this time of year. Where this illustration style worked so well for me in the Samhain deck, it works a little bit less for me in this Yule edition. For me, Yule represents the time of year in the depths of winter, when we try to bring in the light in the darkness. It's all about fireplaces and coziness, and candles and warm blankets. And I'm not completely sure if this illustration style captures that coziness completely for me. Somehow it feels a little bit more spooky and dark. But in the end, that's all personal preference. And I do love to have different oracle decks for different times in the year. And November and December are the perfect time for this deck. And that's the Seasons of the Witch Yule Oracle. Now let's look at some books to match those wintry vibes, starting with Nordic Tales. This is a collection of folk tales from Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark and Iceland. And there are beautiful illustrations throughout the book. The stories are divided in a few themes like journeys and wit. And it's just a perfect way to get in the mood for winter. And that's Nordic Tales. Another lovely collection of short stories from around the world is Winter Tales. This one is illustrated by Zenna Goldhawk, another one of my favorite illustrators. The whole book is filled with beautiful illustrations on almost every page and just brings out all the best wintry vibes. Books like these are great because you can pick them up, read a story, and then come back to them whenever it suits you. And that's Winter Tales. Now let's end this video with some fun eye candy by mixing and matching the decks and books I chose to work with this season. Starting with the deck of mushrooms and the Mushroom Hunters Tarot. The only thing that would make this pair even more perfect is if the deck of mushrooms was an actual oracle deck. But even in its current state, these decks look absolutely beautiful together. I love how the deck of mushrooms has a lot of white space that brings a calm center to the reading. And even with the deck of mushrooms not being an oracle, this is a great and fun way to learn more about mushrooms. The fun trivia and tarot meanings in the little white book of the Mushroom Hunter's Tarot, combined with the interesting information on the back of the cards of the deck of mushrooms, makes the combination of these two decks a lovely resource if you would like to learn a little bit more about mushrooms. And that's the deck of mushrooms and the Mushroom Hunter's Tarot. Now let's use the Mushroom Hunter's Tarot as the center of a reading with the Wildwood Tarot. Even though these are quite different illustration styles, I feel like the colors go really well together. I also love having that grounded archetype of the mushroom as the centerpiece of the reading, complemented by the humans and animals featured in the Wildwood Tarot. And that's the Mushroom Hunter's Tarot and the Wildwood Tarot. This next pairing brings me so much joy. It's the Seasons of the Witch, Mabon Oracle, and the Tarot of the Witch's Garden. The witchy vibes and beautiful colors go so well together. Somehow the combination of these two decks feels so kind and supportive to me. And I've really been enjoying using these two decks together in October. And that's the Seasons of the Witch, Mabon Oracle, and the Tarot of the Witch's Garden. Now let's move into spooky season and combine a book with a tarot deck. Through the Woods looks so lovely next to the Horror Tarot, with the red and black tying these illustrations together beautifully. Sometimes I just like having a little fun with my books and decks, trying to find good matches. And these two certainly succeed in creating spooky vibes together. And that's Through the Woods and the Horror Tarot. For Samhain, let's pair up the Seasons of the Witch, Samhain Oracle, and the Darkwood Tarot. I absolutely love the combination of these two. The colors go so well together, and even though the illustration styles are pretty different, it feels as if these characters are all part of the same story. And I already look forward to using these two decks together at the end of October. And that's the Seasons of the Witch, Samhain Oracle, and the Darkwood Tarot. And last but not least, let's celebrate winter by connecting East of the Sun and West of the Moon with the West of the Moon Oracle. And that's Nordic Tales with the West of the Moon Oracle. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this random collection of books and decks that bring me all the autumnal and wintry vibes. and that helped me transition from early autumn in September to spooky season in October and the depths of winter in December. I would love to hear which decks and books you will use this season, so feel free to leave me a comment down below. And with all of that being said, I wish you all a lovely autumn, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!